Hey everybody, Paul Barron here with my very good friend Bobby Medina, and we have a special guest today, Jim Ross. Jim and I go back many, many decades, too many to talk about probably, in Vancouver, growing up on maybe different sides of the track, and his was definitely the better side. So I wanted to talk with Jim today. We wanted to talk with Jim, and about his time as a second trumpet player, primarily his career, supporting principal players. And I think that's a really important topic to talk about. And just to give you a little bit of background history, Jim was the principal trumpet player for the Vancouver Opera Orchestra. He freelanced in Mexico City for years and also in the Guanajuato Symphony. Did I say
Very
that?
good, Paul. Very
All
good,
right.
Paul. Very good.
And for 25 years, he's been the second trumpet player in the New York Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, and 2 years off for good behavior, where he played a year with the New York Philharmonic and also principal trumpet with the Seattle Symphony. So, Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Bobby. I just have to correct the last statement. I was assistant principal. We don't want any of those principal players getting mad.
Oh, no, we don't, because we know how they
Yeah,
can
we
be.
know the type.
All right, Bobby, why don't you throw out the
So-
first question?
Okay, well, Jim, just for our members here who might not be totally familiar with you and everything, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you first got started playing the trumpet?
Well, like many people my age, which includes the two of us, got started in elementary school in grade 6. The local schools had very robust music classes, which were part of the curriculum, not extracurricular. And I went to a couple of schools in East Vancouver, Lord Nelson Elementary, where I started in grade 6, and Britannia Secondary, where I graduated in 1981. Both had great music teachers and great music programs, something that sadly is lacking these days. Then went on to study privately in Chicago with Mr. Chikowitz at Northwestern University and Mr. Jacobs, the Chicago Symphony, and came back and studied intermittently here in Vancouver with a trumpet player in the Vancouver Symphony named Tom Perriott, who many Vancouver locals spent time seeing. And then I just fell into the freelance scene here in Vancouver, doing the opera, doing some CBC work, subbing with the symphony. And in 1994, I took a red-eye flight to New York, did the audition at the Metropolitan Opera, and to my surprise more than anyone else's, won the job. So as you alluded to in my introduction, I've been there 25 years, 2 years off for good behavior, one at the New York Philharmonic and one in Seattle. And currently, like most of the industry, we're shut down, but we're negotiating return back to work in September, and that's our hope. That's certainly the schedule that our management is putting forth, and we're trying to work really hard to make this a viable job to come back into and maintain the artistic standards of the orchestra. I think there's going to be a great appetite for what we do once we do get back to some quote normalcy. And I think it's going to be my hope is it's going to be a new Roaring 20s.
I hope so too, because I got a great pixie mute now that I can use.
So what is the schedule looking like? Is it going to be? Are they talking about opening it up full time again, or just trickling up, ramping up? I guess I should have said.
Yeah, the plan is to, as is we've been given, is to start, full-throated large productions, no social distancing, but like Mike Tyson used to say, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. So my philosophy is to just roll with things as they happen. I'm hopeful it will happen, and I'm planning on it actually.
So have they been helpful as far as supporting you guys financially through this whole furlough, or have you been kind of like, most of the two countries, I should say, Canada and U.S., in just like unemployment and that sort of thing?
Yes, so I can't say too much as I'm on the orchestra negotiating committee, but I think it's fair to say, in our view, they've done nothing to support us financially. Up until this point, we've not had any paychecks. We've entered in what's called a bridge payment agreement while we're negotiating. They have continued our medical through the pandemic, which we actually negotiated for. It wasn't something that was given to us. Unlike many of the major symphony orchestras who are on a percentage of salary and creating electronically mostly up until this point while they're away and providing content for their employer, the Met has chosen not to partake of any of that. And not just the musicians, but every one of the unionized employees has been furloughed with no pay.
Wow.
And that's a considerable workforce. It's, over 3,000 people.
Wow.
Okay, well, let's get the ball rolling here with, just talking about, what you're most known for, your most known role as second trumpet or maybe assistant principal. But when we have a lot of people that have asked, over the past, we're coming up on 2 years or year and a half or something like that. But they've been, talking about playing lead trumpet and this and that, and it's fine. We understand there's a lot of interest in that, but there's also a lot of need and a lot of support that takes place in the rest of with the second, third, fourth trumpet players or whatever, depending on the type of group setting you're in. And so kind of like what goes into that? What's your philosophy about it? And what kind of skills do you need to play, right, like in an orchestra like this?
Well, first, the philosophy is it's to make your first player, your principal player, or whoever's leading the section at the moment sound as good as they can. To try and be agreeable, both musically, personally, emotionally. You guys know working in pits, it's close quarters and you're stuck in there for a long, long time. So you got to do your best to get along. Also, to sort of, I liked the fact that throughout my career so far, I've had principal players in all my jobs come to me or in the moment say, hey, play this, where am I at with that? So basically to not seek my advice, but to seek some reassurance that they're in the right spot, either time-wise, usually pitch-wise. And you have to be a bit of a psychologist to sort of in a nice way steer them like, I'm really having trouble finding you there. Yeah, maybe it's a little sharp. It's never flat, by the way. It's always sharp. So you have to have, I think, pretty good interpersonal skills. And you have to sort of put your ego aside because we all aspire to be sitting in that first chair, and we all develop our skills in the orchestra world, especially to play that first chair, or in band and all through our times getting educated. No one wants to say, I can't wait to play third trumpet on that.
Until we get older and smarter and show up at a big band or a recording studio, and then you're like, where's the sixth trumpet part?
I have a funny story that way with Tony Cadillac, who you all know, and very versatile player, great arranger, composer. Now he's playing valve trombone. He's doing everything and doing it great. And so we'd go in to do sessions. I would do either there was a couple of main employers for jingles or movie soundtracks, And it didn't matter how early you got there and wanted to get in that third chair. Tony was there. You could get to the session an hour early and Tony's in the chair doing a crossword puzzle. I was like, damn, I thought I was here early enough.
But that's great advice right there.
Show up early. Another reason to show up extra early.
That's right. That's right. But, it's the other skills that are involved are listening, and sometimes listening past what the first player is doing and linking it with whatever else is going on in the orchestra. Quite often when we play Verdi operas, I know that I'm going to be linked in the same tessitura or the same function, harmonically, sometimes melodically, as the third horn and the second trombone. So sometimes it involves listening past your section as well. And I like to sort of, it's a weird little thing that I discovered, but I like to actually keep, as well as keep an ear out, keep an eye out. If I can adjust my seat, so I can see where the first trumpet player is breathing. I can see a lot of players physically set up, and I want to be able to see all that visually and use that for my timing. So it's just trying to, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth. So keep the eyes and ears open and keep the mouth shut, and adapt and adjust. Don't be so pig-headed and unwilling. If you're way off the map with the principal player, you're going to have the skills to sit and talk about it too. Like, it's a bit of a psychology job too, because the last thing you want as a principal player in any situation is someone who doesn't support you. Like, not to lie to you or kiss you behind, but just, don't vibe them out. Just support them. It's really important. I know I've taken great comfort in having a great second player when I move up and play first. So I like to try and do the same.
That's a great point. All of us are lead players in our own our own genres and so on, and we all play section parts as well. And I know from my experience, and Bobby and Jim as well, that boy, we sure appreciate a great section player. And when I play section, I want to be that guy that I so appreciated when I was playing lead. So it's a fun hat to take off the lead hat and put on the section hat, and your ears, wouldn't you say, Jim, your ears change size almost, where when I'm playing in a lead role, I'm a little more focused this way, in that I'm leading and I got to do it this way, or at least the way that I think. And when I'm playing a section part, it's almost like the horse. I know you're a horse guy as well, where you're taking the blinders more off and encompassing more. Like you said, you want to see the principal player also breathe for your timing too. So it's interesting to move those blinders aside.
It's like there's a different kind of an awareness, when you play, I think. I mean, there should be aware of everything anyways, but there's a different kind of focus when you're playing lead as opposed to playing an inner part. And sometimes it's oftentimes a little, in some ways, more difficult with the types of intervals, intervallic things we're playing, and, tuning and all that stuff,
Yeah, that's a fair point. I know when I move up to first, it even goes so far as on familiar operas, if we're doing a Bohème or a Tosca, something I've played a million times and don't ever need to rehearse again. There's parts where I would automatically start playing the second trumpet part when I'm playing first, just for a note or two, And I view first trumpet as being a little more on a high wire. It's not that there's more to lose. The voice is more prominent, first of all. The tessitura is higher. You have to have physically a little different setup. Maybe a little, in my playing, I'm not a high compression player, or don't venture into that territory too much. But making sure you're coming out on top a little more, so adjusting your sound color as well as your volume level. and you're the one setting those rather than reacting to them. So I find that aspect of playing first easier. It's like, I don't have to listen to these million things. I'm just going to hang up there and play it like I think it should go. And it's not easier. It's just a different skill set. But I take my hat off to those who do it all the time. I'm coming up and doing it sometimes in a pinch, when someone's sick or on vacation, and it's fine. It ends up sounding fine, but there's something about someone who's in that position all the time, an assuredness that they can have, and a familiarity that they can have, that maybe it's just my perception when I'm doing it, but I'm always comforted to have the real first trumpet player there. It's like, you go do that, I'll help you any way I can, but yeah, you row the boat, buddy.
Do you feel a little less pressure maybe playing an inner part?
Yeah. And that's not, when I freelance in New York with the American Symphony Orchestra or Orchestra of St. Luke's or any number of things, I do play first, and I play first at the opera on occasion. But yeah, I think my skill set is developed to the point where I know that I'm a better second trumpet player than first trumpet player. And maybe if I'd been playing trumpet in a principal position for 25 years in an orchestra, I'd feel the opposite. But it's not that I'm egoless, but I sort of know at this point what I do best. And that extends to opportunities that I've had that make you go, oh, well, yeah, I've always wanted to do that. And then you think, should I be doing that? I don't know if I want to do that. I remember being called for Brandenburg a number of times, and just like, they'd start, before they even told me how much it paid, I'd just say, nope, not available. Or to play Stravinsky Le Soir du Soldat, it's like, yeah, we're going to do it in this high profile environment, no conductor, one rehearsal. It's like, nope, not going to do that. But there are opportunities that arise, and I still have the recorded voicemail on my phone where the Chicago Symphony calls and says, can you come out and play first trumpet for the week? You're like, yeah, I'll do that. That's going to be worth it. That's the dream. So.
Well, speaking about that, we've had thoughts about, practicing in the technical areas of playing. And I'm kind of curious because you now studied with Chikowitz and Arnold Jacobs. I wonder if you could just reflect on that a little bit and just talk about, their pedagogy. We have so many different schools of trumpet playing, and all of them, have helped various people. And both Paul and I, when we get involved in this, we try really not to be too dogmatic about things and judgmental about different schools. We're both open to having learned as much as we can about different schools of thought. I'm just kind of curious as to how they helped you improve.
I think my understanding of it now, 40 years plus after the fact, or 40 years after the fact, is much different. At the time, the two things that I took away from both Mr. Jacobs, Mr. Chikowitz, my teacher Tom Perriott, who studied with both those people, my teacher Susan Slaughter, who studied with Mr. Jacobs, was, first of all, making a beautiful sound a sound as possible. Now, of course, that's going to change depending on what idiom you play, right? The other thing is fostering a physical awareness of what's happening. I think where we went a little wrong in the trumpet world with some of those teachings, in particular Mr. Jacobs, was with not the use of air, but the volume of air needed. Someone said, boy, great tuba playing sure has ruined many trumpet players. So my understanding of their instructions to me and their teaching has changed considerably. I've scaled things down physically. I now think of having more of a natural enhanced breath, um, rather than that kind of thing, where you're engaging your whole body. But I think there comes a point early on where you have to foster the awareness of the mechanism, and that's when all the deep breathing and all the tools and all the visualization tools and those things may come into play and be most effective. And as we get on in our professional lives or our careers or even our hobbies, and we become more efficient, we need those reminders less and less. But this is probably a good segue into aging as a trumpet player, because I'm finding now I have to be even more mindful of those concepts when something goes wrong. And it's also maybe a function of not sitting in the orchestra 2 times a day for the last year and change, and being less in playing shape, and more in practice mode. So if something's not to my liking, I'll videotape it. I'll go back and look. I just posted a thing on Facebook today, if anyone wants to look, about directing the air and bringing a resonance and supporting the pitch and sound. And it's very simple. It's just 5 notes. It's starting on a G on the staff and going down to a C on B flat. But the first time I did it in my warm up, I said, I'm feeling like unsupported, unenergetic. How am I going to change that? And for me, it was, not to get too deep into the woods, but thinking about placing the air higher on the note, higher on the pitch, focusing the air into the embouchure that's vibrating, because that's a very small area, and thinking up on the sound. And I never used to have to do that. But I won my last audition when I was 50 years old. I'm now going to be 58. So I won one in my 30s, my 40s, my 50s. I have one more decade to go. No. But as I age, I have to be more mindful of those practices and basics than I used to when I was younger. I started noticing a drop-off personally in my own expectation of what I was doing when I was about 55. It just wasn't as easy anymore. I had to be really mindful, and I had to be really much more in the moment mentally too. That's the other part of what's going on in the world right now. There's so much more to be, I don't want to say worried of, but attuned to, and you have to have the mental ability to put that aside for a half an hour and do your practice session. And I know for me, the last number of years, maybe even a couple decades, the only time I make a mistake, not that I'm mistake free, but more often than not, when I do make one, it's because I'm not mentally in the moment and I'm distracted. So I'm finding more and more in my practice sessions, they have to be purposeful, mindful, and targeted as well.
So do you do something to strengthen that area? Because the mental part of playing and being in the moment, as you're saying, your awareness, I'm really into that. Both Paul and I are into that. We are both martial artists, and we're kind of into a little bit of that. But do you do other things outside of just trumpet playing to learn to focus your mind? Do you work with meditation, or do you have some other kinds of things that might be helpful?
I used to do, haven't done it for a couple of years now for various reasons, but hot yoga and actually trying to ignore the heat and what your body is saying to your mind was really a good tool. Mostly I try and just, I think sometimes when I breathe in to just let go, just like turn the mind off. And I find this in lessons sometimes with really intelligent players. I'm like, you might be too smart to be a trumpet player. You got to be a little dumber for a minute. Just turn that brilliant mind off and just
Wait,
be.
I don't get it.
So,
What are you trying to say? What?
no, you got it. You got it.
Well, I'm one of these like squirrel, next shiny flashing object, and I tend to do that, and I tend to be a person that's trying to do a lot of things at one time, and I've read that there is no such thing as really multitasking. It's your brain going from here to there to there to there, so you're not focusing on any one thing 100%.
I remember one thing that I did early on. I was working on the fronts of notes, the first release of the sound, and coordinating the articulation and the air. And Susan had a concept for me of targeting. Like if it's a mezzo piano and it's on the staff, maybe you just want to target 10 feet into the room. And then, as you progress out to louder and more aggressive playing, further and further, and then narrow it down to that little bullseye. And another thing is when you talk about being distracted, I would, when I was working on things like that and timing everything, the taking in the breath and the releasing of the sound and the coordination of the fingers and the tongue in the air and the lips vibrating, I would actually turn the lights off in the practice room and just be really conscious of my breathing and focusing in on those 3 or 4 elements that go to make that moment, so that was a good way for me to, pre-pandemic, it was a little different. It's like, just finish the show at 11:30 at night, hop in the car, have a drink, go to bed 1:30, get up at 7:30, see the kids, go stick the trumpet on the face, turn on Sports Center, and do my routine, before going to work, warming up again, and starting the day. So there was not as much mindfulness until you go and teach a lesson and you say, no, kid, you got to do it this way. And then you go, oh, I really didn't demonstrate that very well. Maybe I need to take some of my own advice.
So are you finding that that to get your body working and to get your sound where you want it, it takes longer now than it did, say, in your 30s or 40s?
Yeah, and I try to mitigate that a little bit as I change what I do to get ready. So quite often, basically after starting just some really soft articulations, little mouthpiece buzzing, not excessively, some pentatonic scales, a little spit buzzing, and then I'll just go starting on a G and go down chromatically to the bottom of the B flat trumpet, very gently articulated, almost a do tongue. I'll go right into doing scales, starting on low F sharp up until high C, to try and incorporate getting that out of the way first, right? And not have it be such a mental hang up as well, too. It's, I remember someone saying, maybe it was Pete Bond saying, what would the trumpet world be like if we didn't call it a high C? We just called it C, like to hold it up there as this paragon, rather than just saying, that's another note on the trumpet,
It's true. I've heard from some people that have said, yeah, I never knew that I knew that I could. I just started playing high when I was very young, and I never knew it was a big deal. And later on, I developed all this power and range, but it was never like something. I was not like adding another 50 pounds or whatever, to the barbell.
I was sort of heartened in a way when I returned to Vancouver and I saw a lot of my old friends still sounding great. And there were so many players that are new to me. And Paul, Michael Kim, right?
I'm getting to know him, yes. Both Bobby and I have done some recording for him, and my God.
That's what I said, too. That's not possible.
Yeah.
And my understanding of him is it's not that he's not a serious musician, but it's, he has other interests. He
does, I know. And it's depressing to me.
Well, he loves what he's doing. He loves that style of playing, and I think he's really focused on it. And what he does is pretty exceptional.
Yeah, it's pretty singular.
So, Jim, I'm curious where your time in Mexico fit into the timeline with winning the Met audition and all of that.
So I graduated high school in '81, and I pretty soon after that moved out of the house. Not because there was anything awful going on, but I wanted to be on my own. So from the time I was 18, I've had to work to keep a roof over my head. So, we all can't get a job for the Parks Board, Paul. So some of us has to work in the fish. Some of us have to work in a fish plant. So I worked full time and continued to study. And then in '86, I went away to Chicago for the winter and studied, as I said, with Mr. Shikowitz and Mr. Jacobs, and heard the orchestra. Then I came back, returned again to sort of freelance in Vancouver, work back at the fish plant. So in about '89 or '90, I went to Mexico, just sight unseen, actually. Someone told me about a job, and I called them up, and they said, "Oh yeah, come down." And didn't speak a lick of Spanish. It was absolutely hilarious. So that was in the early '90s, and then returned to Vancouver. Was really lucky enough to have a couple local players, Jim Littleford and Henry Christian, really look out for me and recommend me for work, and be very generous with that. And I started freelancing more, and then I was in the opera orchestra here in Vancouver and freelancing with the symphony. And that work dried up after my teacher, who had the associate chair, passed away. They started using other players. And I auditioned for the Vancouver Symphony as the associate principal trumpet. And I came in the top handful of players. And I thought, well, I've proven myself. I'll start getting called again now. And it never happened. And then I just thought, I got to start going and making it on my own and start doing auditions, which I hadn't till that point. I hadn't gone through the usual youth orchestra, university programs. I had very little, institutional schooling, always private lessons. And I started auditioning in 1994, and I did the Vancouver audition and did well. Then I did the Royal Canadian Ballet, and was one of the finalists. Then I won Symphony Nova Scotia as a principal trumpet, and a few weeks later had the audition at the Met. And I went not on a lark, but just thought, I may never get to New York again, so I'll just go and have the experience of doing that. And the job I really wanted actually that year, which I was getting ready for, was second trumpet in the Oregon Symphony, just to be down still on the West Coast. And but that never happened. So the Mexico stuff was a few years before the Met. It was at the time a great testing ground, if you will, because you covered a lot of rep. There's some good orchestras down there. And they were good, stable jobs at the time, because they're all government jobs. There continues to be, don't want to say a resurgence, but 70s, 80s, 90s, a lot of American and non-Mexican players. Now the level of brass playing in Mexico there's some great trumpet players down there in the orchestra world.
So I'm curious about the audition process, because just that word alone, right now I'm sort of getting chills, and I'm starting to shake, because it scares the bejeebers out of me. And fortunately, I've not had to do it more than, I think, twice. And one of them, Jim, you'll laugh. Everybody out there, this is he's gone now. He was almost 100 years old, Dal Richards, but I had to audition for him. So this is for a silly, swing band that plays, public events and weddings and whatever, just a dance band. But I was scared to death. So can you talk us through a little bit about your mindset, especially, I guess, for auditions, and how you don't just freak out like I would?
Well, every job I approach, and by job I mean even a freelance job, orchestra job, I put in a lot of time preparing the material, and my mindset has always been, I never want to be caught. I never want to lose the job because I didn't put in the time. So having put in the time comforts me, knowing I've done the work. Uh, and it's just about how you're going to be perceived on that day. I was in the final round at the Met with two trumpet players I really respect and can truly play circles around me. Um, but what I brought to my audition that day was just perchance by what they were looking for that day. So you have to also realize that a lot of the things are out of your control. The things that you can control are the work you put in. You can control the parameters of how you play something. In other words, when you're on the job or in the orchestra, you have to adjust to what's going on in the moment, or what the conductor's asking for. When you're in an audition situation, you're the one that sets the bar as far as your dynamics, your tempi, the stylistic way you approach something. So control the things you can in an audition. And number one is preparation. Number two are all the parameters of what you want to play. The third is know yourself well enough to know which of that guy's or girl or person you're going to be. The one with the headphones on, ignoring everyone, or the one going around talking to everyone. And if you happen to be like me, I just very quiet and try and shut things out. And also know yourself well enough that if that person who is the chatty one comes up to you and you don't want to talk to them, say, hey, I'd love to talk to you later, but now's not the time. Another rule I have is I don't do the audition unless I think I'm ready. There was two I won't say pretty prominent orchestras, but two great orchestras that I was invited to the finals to, just based on my professional resume. And both times I had bronchial issues. And maybe it's part of my own twisted psyche too. There was a couple things I didn't do as well as I wanted to. So in my own twisted mind, I was thinking they were going to focus on that instead of all the 9,000 other great notes I played.
Yeah.
So that's just part of our tortured sensibility, right? That comes from just putting ourselves under the microscope every day.
Well, and not everybody on the panel is auditioning us as a trumpet player.
Yeah. So, could be ready, do the work, control the things you can. There's all sorts of little tricks. It sounds trite, but getting there early, even the day before, if you can, familiarizing yourself with the environment. Walk from your hotel to the hall to get that route down. Time it. Hey, how long is this going to take? I mean, that was before Google Maps. Bring snacks, bring something to read, bring plenty of water, stay hydrated. And one thing that I learned is sometimes these situations, you're distracted by what's going on in the other rooms or what's coming on over the speakers, because quite often they'll play what's happening on the stage throughout the hall. So I always turn that off. I never want to hear people and how they're going to play. So I very much keep in my own bubble. And then, like I said, previous to the event, doing the work. There is no replacement for that. If you could look yourself in the eye at the end of the day and say, it sounds cliche, but if you can say, I gave it all I could, you have to be happy with yourself. And I would say, please yourself. That should be the measure of your success, if you please yourself. Now, if you're going down the wrong path completely and deluding yourself, that's one thing. After you do 20 auditions and don't get a call back, that's, maybe time to get an outside opinion. But, and the other thing too, which I was glad I waited till I was older. I won't say more mature because I'm not even sure I'm that yet, but at least older and more assured of myself. You know, an instance of that was at my Met audition. I was in the finals and they put me in a room and they said, we're going to come and get you and so you can time things and get things ready in 15 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever it was. I said, great. So I was going on that time frame, you know, oiling the valves and thinking about things and mentally going through the excerpt. And 5 minutes into this 20 minutes or so, there was a knock on the door. I said, oh, we have to change rooms. It's like, okay, well, just so you know, we're only 5 minutes in. So once we get to the room, I need you to start that 20 minutes over again. You know, so you have to be assured enough in the situation to take care of yourself, because, you know, they're not trying to do anything nefarious in an audition. They're trying to make the audition run on time and run smoothly. And, you know, this is day 3 or 4 and they're down to 3 people and they want to get it done. But I felt strongly enough that I needed to get mentally ready and physically ready. And I wanted the time to start over, so I said so. So looking after my own interests in that way has never been a problem for me. I understand people are different, but, you know, it's your time when you go do the auditions. It's your time, and take advantage of that.
Now, is that something that they would afford you that time if it was the very first round, or is it because it was, you know, into the final rounds that you could have that time?
Yeah, I think because it was in the finals and you know, there was only 3 candidates to listen to, down from the 100 and whatever 20 who they started with and the 250 who applied, and it's and I've been on the other side of the curtain, and it's an arduous task. So it's not that you want to get out of there, but, you know, you really want to make it as efficient as possible. So I would have said the same thing if it was the beginning round. Whether or not they would have accommodated me, I'm not so sure.
Well, hey, Jim, I know we're just about out of time here, and I'd like to wrap it up with one last question or one last thought that you might have that we've been asking some people, but that our members are interested in. And, you know, what is your COVID practicing sort of routine, I guess, for lack of a better word, been over this past year, whatever, for yourself? How has it differed from your regular one, if you can put it in a quick synopsis?
Well, it's different in terms of its frequency. Unless a concert is happening, and I've done a couple. Well, I went out to Montreal back in the fall. I just did something for Vancouver Opera. I'm doing something with the Metropolitan Opera Players, going down to Dallas and playing. So it's different in frequency. My main goal has stayed the same, and that's try and have a resonant, easy, physically produced, good sound, healthy, basic habits. And I've reconciled the fact that, you know, I'm not going to be able to do as much as I could do. I just want to sort of keep things going until we do return to work, and we will, by the way. We definitely will. When the jobs happen intermittently, as they have for me, I sort of ramp it back up and tailor my needs to that. But my basic routine hasn't changed, except, like I said, in terms of frequency. In the initial post-pandemic, as I said, I'm on our orchestra committee, and there was 8 or 10 days that went by where I didn't touch the trumpet, and that's about the longest it's ever been in my life. And look, if I miss a day now, it's not as crucial. I don't kill myself. I would, be very upset with myself if I missed a day before. Now I'm like, I missed a day. I wonder what it's going to feel like tomorrow. So tomorrow will happen.
Yeah.
So,
That's very interesting. I've been doing the same thing, Jim, and sometimes it'll go a couple of days of no playing, and, you know, so what? I know where to place the mouthpiece, and I figure, well, you know, maybe I'm going to be a little out of shape, but I know how to get back into shape. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of liberating almost. And I, it's kind of funny maybe, but I'm discovering how long I can go without playing and how little time it takes to get back if I actually use my brain for a change, which doesn't happen often.
Well, we are trumpet players.
Yes, exactly.
You can only ask so much.
I totally agree with that. I was just down in Palm Springs visiting Paul and Trinka, and with my wife celebrating her birthday, and I didn't hardly touch the thing for the whole week we were there, and I got right back, and it's like no problem. And then the longest time was about a year and a half ago, or a couple of years ago now. I guess we had our 30th anniversary, and we took a month off, and we went to New Zealand and Australia and Fiji and all these places. And I did have my horn and my practice mute, and I maybe played 15 minutes, 20 minutes a day in my cruise ship cabin or in the hotel or whatever we're on. But it wasn't every day. It might have been 4 or 5 days a week. And I got back home, and 2 days later, the next following, I think it was like a day and a half later, I had to play a big band gig, and I had to play lead on it, and I managed to do it. It was I was kind of astounded, and it is liberating because you don't feel like these shackles are on you 24/7. On the other hand, there is a certain edge you lose, so it's always this balancing act that we need to try to maintain.
Well, in my job, at the beginning of each season, we literally have a preseason. It's called preseason, and it's 3 weeks of preseason rehearsals, double rehearsals, and you quickly find out how out of shape you are, in spite of what you've done in the summer. But if you have good, healthy habits, it comes back quick.
Mhm.
It's the thing. First day you're gassed, second day you're like, not too bad. Third day, you're like, oh, this is worse than the first day. By about day 4, you found your equilibrium.
Well, that's a point well taken. And Jim, it's been just like an absolute pleasure learning here from you and understanding a little bit more about you and your background. And Paul, thanks for bringing Jim into this thing. This is it's something exceptional, and it's something different. And I hope all of our members will get a lot out of this.
Well, Paul, when this border opens back up, we'll undoubtedly gather for a beer. And Bobby, I hope wherever you are, you'll be able to join us.
That sounds great. I'm in.
That sounds good.
Thanks so much,
That's good.
guys. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye.
Be well.